we used to introduce her on the We Are West Ham podcast as Kathryn. Well, I used to introduce her actually as Kathryn Batte from the Daily Mail for about 2 years until she finally told me, despite semi-regular contact between the two of us, that her name's actually pronounced Batty. So it's Kathryn Batte from the Daily Mail, formerly just the Daily Mail's women's football correspondent, but now also BBC TV superstar. Kathryn, how are you? Did that introduction do it and you justice?
Yeah, no, I couldn't have asked for much more there, to be fair. Very good.
What was so for those people listening who may be confused / didn't see you, how did you wing your way onto the BBC TV screens at the weekend, which was, I saw through your Twitter and Instagram, so you're clearly quite proud of it. As you should be, our lad.
Yeah, I like to give the impression that I kind of know what I'm talking about, without actually knowing what I'm talking about. But basically, I was the only journalist pretty much there. So there wasn't.
Where was this? What game were you at?
Yeah, so it was at the Brighton Man City game, and usually it was on the BBC Red Button, and usually on the BBC matches they speak to one of the written journalists at half time just to kind of either ask them about the game or kind of stuff going on in the women's world. But obviously it was 0-0 at half time and not much had happened, so he didn't speak much about the game. He ended up kind of speaking about COVID and transfers and stuff like that. But yeah, I was pretty much, there was a couple of other people there, but most people had either gone to Birmingham Arsenal or were sort of isolating. So
yeah,
probably more through kind of lack of options than sort of anything else. I managed to sort of go on for a couple of minutes.
Don't be putting yourself down like Jonesy. The one thing I'm a little bit concerned about is that although she's quite good at it, Kathryn doesn't quite publicise her appearances on the We Are West Ham podcast as much as she does on the BBC Red Button. Have you any thoughts on that?
No, well, that's before we went live, Sanders. This is an upgrade to the BBC, obviously. So fully expecting later on this week when we do go live to be all over your Instagram and your Twitter.
Screen grabs. Yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah. Did you wheel out any cliches, Kathryn? Is it true, the rumours I'm hearing on the ground, that you actually said live on television, it's a game of two halves?
No, but if I had said that, it'd been very accurate considering it was 0-0 at half time and then Man City scored 6 in the second half. But no, that was just a little joke caption. But no, it was mainly kind of, because I've asked about COVID really and sort of transfers. And not actually much on the game. I was hoping to get my Michael Owen line out about whoever scores the most goals wins, but didn't quite have time for it.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, look, James Jones is the king of cliches on this podcast, so he would have been absolutely delighted to hear that you'd wheeled out the game of two halves shtick. But we have got you here tonight, not just because of your broadcasting brilliance, but of course because your in-depth knowledge on the WSL and for our podcast, the West Ham Women. So before we do that, it's been a bit of a barren spell, if you like, women's football wise, quite an extended break. So now we've got the serious stuff out of the way, and your burgeoning TV career. What's sort of going on away from West Ham, perhaps? What are the big sort of stories in the WSL at the moment, or in the new year in particular? Things that listeners should be looking out for, perhaps a bit further afield than just West Ham. What sort of things are interesting you, or that you're reporting on at the moment that sort of things to look out for at this time and further into the year?
Well, obviously it is January, so transfers are kind of going on. Obviously West Ham have already made a signing, Emma Snurler, which I think I had to Google how to pronounce. I'm still not convinced I did it right. Arsenal and Man United kind of fighting over Stina Black-Stenius, who is probably she's going to end up in the WSL. It's just a case of whether she goes to Arsenal or Manchester United.
From where?
So she was playing for Häcken in Sweden, but their league runs to a different time, and she's out of contract there now. So she obviously played in the Champions League for them. Swedish international, very good striker. Looked like she was probably going to go to Man United, but Arsenal have kind of come in and might be hijacking that one. So next week or so, next few days, that might come over the line. Obviously, we've got the Conti Cup quarterfinals coming up in a couple of weeks' time. West Ham got a very nice draw of Chelsea. Nice, easy one. And of course, Chelsea were previously in the Champions League, so you might have thought might not be too bothered about the Conti Cup, but got knocked out of the Champions League on the last group game. So I'm sure Emma Hayes will be desperate to get through in that one. And obviously FA Cup, WSL teams going into the next round of the FA Cup at the end of the month as well. So yeah, there's plenty going on. I mean, obviously it's a shame that so many games are being called off with COVID, but as we've kind of seen in the Premier League, there's not an awful lot you can do, and sometimes the rules are a bit blurred. So difficult.
Kathryn, it's been a month since the last game, and from a West Ham perspective, obviously they went into that break in such great form, and now with the transfer window, opportunity to strengthen the squad a little bit. How do you think Oli Harder will have approached things during that break? Will he have looked to kind of, I mean, looking to bring players in, he's already put one in, but is it going to be business as usual? Do you see him maybe making a few tweaks to the way he's been doing things, just to try and freshen things up a little bit and continue that run of form that they took into that break?
Yeah, well, I think the good thing for him is they're not really looking over the shoulders this season like they were last year. Even though Birmingham surprisingly beat Arsenal at the weekend, it still is likely going to be between them and Leicester to go down, maybe Aston Villa if they get dragged into it. But he has got a chance now to maybe, if he wants to have a look at other systems and, as you say, kind of change things up, he can do that without maybe with a bit more freedom than he could have done in the first part of the season. Now they've got that points tally on the board. But I think he'll just kind of want to keep seeing progression. Obviously, he's implemented his philosophy in the squad now. They've had time to get used to it. But yeah, he'll want to bed in Emma as well. If any other signings that he brings in, he'll obviously look to bed them in as well. But obviously they went into the break in good form, and obviously it's a bit of a shame that they've had such a long gap between playing before Christmas and playing now. But there's quite a few teams in that situation. Obviously they played Tottenham at the weekend, and Tottenham's game against Chelsea was called off last weekend, and they'd gone into the break in quite good form as well. So they're in the same boat as quite a few teams.
Do you think it would have worked? Do you think it would have worked in West Ham's favour though, just having a bit of time off? Or I mean, you said most teams are in the same boat, but I mean, you look at a month's break and you think,
seems long, doesn't it?
It's a long time to go without playing competitive football. Do you think it would have worked in their favour? Do you think that we'll see West Ham and a lot of the other teams maybe taking a little bit of time to get back into a little bit of form and get back into back firing again? Yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me if it does take time, because obviously they had the unfortunate situation where they didn't play the last weekend before Christmas as well. So they've had a longer break than most teams. And even Arsenal not playing before Christmas, coming back out against Birmingham, it seemed to affect them. And I wondered if that was part of the reason why they were a bit sluggish. Birmingham had played Leicester the last weekend going into Christmas, and you don't know how fresh Arsenal were, and how much of a difference it made. But we've also seen kind of even in the men's game when Man United came back a few weeks ago against Newcastle after its sort of 2.5 week break, everyone thought they'd be really fresh, and actually they were quite slow. So that it might be quite difficult for them coming back into that situation. Obviously, Tottenham did play before Christmas, and I think they won as well. But they've also had a break, and I'm not sure how much of a difference a week before Christmas would make. They've both Tottenham and West Ham in the same boat in terms of after coming back from Christmas having that gap. So it's hard to predict really, but hopefully it won't really make much of a difference.
So it's Tottenham away, Kathryn, as you mentioned there, Sunday afternoon, 6:45, or Sunday evening, 7:15 kickoff. Spurs are absolutely flying this season. They had the result away at Man City earlier in the campaign, which I think perhaps it's fair to say surprised a couple of people, albeit Man City weren't on a great run. They've recovered a little bit, City now up in 5th. West Ham on 9 games on 13 points, actually just 3 points behind City with that game in hand, albeit with a worse goal difference. But Tottenham in 3rd, 7 points ahead of West Ham at the moment, having played a game more. absolutely flying. Is that something you saw coming, or is that a pleasant surprise for fans of Spurs?
I don't think really anyone kind of realistically saw Tottenham as contenders for the top three at the start of the season. I think a few people kind of talked about Brighton and Everton, perhaps because Everton were making a lot of signings. Tottenham made a few, but not any that sort of massively would jump out and sort of say, oh, that's going to propel them to top three. But I think they've had the benefit of sort of similar to West Ham in that they had, obviously Ryan Skinner came in last January, had time to obviously get the points that they needed to stay up last season, and then has had a whole summer with the squad, and has already been able to build kind of the type of football they want to play, and has got her team really well drilled. And I think we've kind of, people know what to expect from Tottenham a little bit more now, perhaps more so than they did at the start of the season. We know they're going to be a team that digs in. Will kind of look to play on the break, look to sort of get Rachel Williams in behind, and probably aren't going to dominate possession. So it's whether after this break, whether the teams have maybe worked them out a little bit. And of course, they did lose to West Ham earlier in the season, perhaps maybe to some people's surprise, because obviously Tottenham had been doing so well. But I think maybe in games where they're maybe expected to kind of go on the front foot a little bit more, it doesn't actually suit them. It suits them to kind of let the opposition sort of maybe dictate the play, soak up the pressure, and then try and get a goal on the break or from a set piece. And they've taken points off a lot of big teams this season. Obviously beat City, drew with Arsenal, drew with Manchester United as well. So they're doing pretty well.
Yeah. Certainly not going into the game feeling nervous or anything like that about it. That game's Sunday evening, like I mentioned there. Then it's Chelsea next up in the quarterfinals of the Conti Cup, as you've already mentioned. That's Wednesday, 19th of Jan. So we'll have a chat about that on next week's podcast. Looking ahead to that Spurs game then, Kathryn, how do you see it going sort of stylistically? Do you give West Ham any chance, and then give us a score prediction?
Yeah, I think West Ham will, as we say, obviously beaten Tottenham once already this season. It'll be really interesting to see how both teams approach it, whether West Ham attack Tottenham and try and, as you say, play on the front foot, or whether they kind of almost sort of try and force Tottenham into coming forward and then look to kind of get in behind, because we know obviously Oli Harder likes his pressing style of football, which worked last time against Tottenham. It's really hard to call, obviously, with the gap that both teams have had. But I could see it being quite a close one. Obviously, the first game in the season was quite close as well, so I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up a draw, which I know is kind of sitting on the fence massively. But yeah, I think if I was to give a score prediction, I'd maybe say 1-1.
1-1. I think, to be honest, after the break like that, Jonesy, after the break that you mentioned there, mate, and given the team's respective positions in the league and having already beat them already, I think just to get 2022 off and underway, would you take a draw there just to get that points total ticking again in the new year?
100%. Definitely take a point. Away from home as well. Tottenham in good form. Haven't played in a month. Yeah, you just avoid defeat in this game, and I think you've got to look at it and say that's a good result.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. There's Everton at home on the 23rd of Jan coming up in the WSL before an away trip to Sheffield United in the fourth round of the Women's FA Cup on January the 30th. Then games against Villa, Leicester, Chelsea and Birmingham follow in the WSL. It's an exciting time for the West Ham women. The start to the season, I think, it's fair to say, is considered positive by everyone, fans and journalists included. Most people we spoke to think just sort of do a decent effort by Oli Harder, especially I think considering the turnaround job, the turning the tanker around that he had to do last season. He managed to do that, and it seems to have pushed on. Things are going in the right direction rather than wrong, which is brilliant. And there's every chance with the games coming up, if we can hit the ground running in the early part of this year, particularly this month, you sort of accept that you are likely to go out the Conti Cup to Chelsea, just as we did last year, albeit that was in the semi-final stage. But if they can get a decent run on board, particularly in the league, there's no reason, with as tight as it is in the WSL, that they couldn't be knocking on the door further up the league. So Kathryn tells me that, or tells us, that a draw would be a decent result. Me and Jonesy, I think, are of the same opinion. Just looking ahead then, Kathryn, before we let you go, what do you think would be a reasonable expectation? Now we're at sort of that halfway point in the season. What do you think would be a reasonable rest of the season for West Ham?
Yeah, I think they're seventh at the moment in the table, I think.
Sorry, I just had it up there.
They dropped down for not playing. So, yeah, I think...
Just with that game in hand, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, we're going into the break, I think we're seventh, and that was, pretty decent position, I think. I do think Man City are obviously beating Brighton at the weekend. I do think they're going to, get back up to possibly take third spot. And then you've obviously got Tottenham, Man United around sort of fourth, fifth, also looking to get third, and Brighton there as well. But, Brighton have struggled recently, sort of lost 2 going into the break. Obviously been lost heavily against Man City. There's no reason why West Ham might sort of look at them and think that the team we could possibly maybe overtake if their run continues. And obviously you mentioned the FA Cup, Sheffield United a division below. It should, if he plays a strong enough team, Oli Harder should be able to get through to the next round of that. And if the draw is kinder than the Conti Cup, maybe a cup run would be something West Ham could look at now, kind of being safe in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. I think positive stuff all round. Fingers crossed we could pick up something at the weekend. Kathryn, it's brilliant to have you with us, our first West Ham women guest of the new year. We wish you all the very best with your up-and-coming television superstar career. When you leave newspapers and podcasting behind us, don't forget us, will you? Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Kathryn Batte there from the Daily Mail, women's football correspondent, and Jared Bowen's #1 fan, giving her allegiances to Hull City. Great to have you back on the show again. Positive.